Hi, I'm Robert Berger, and in this section I want to show you how to make dip wax copings using the Kerr Microdip 2. There are three important things I want you to know about dip wax copings. First, they are the fastest, most accurate way to make a wax coping. Second, the temperature of the dipping wax determines the thickness of the coping. In my laboratory, I've set my Microdip 2 at 180 degrees Fahrenheit. This is giving me a coping that has a thickness of between 3/10 and 4/10 of a millimeter. But in your laboratory, the environment will most likely be different. So you'll have to do your own test to determine the exact temperature setting that will yield the coping thickness you desire. Third, wax matters. I'm using Kerr's Bell Wax Dipping Wax. This is a microcrystalline formula that is specifically designed to create a uniform thickness of the wax and leave a flexible memory for easy handling. There's basically three types of dies that we're going to find in normal casework. An anterior die with a single incisal point, an anterior die with corners, a double incisal point, and a posterior die with cusp tips, buccal, facial, and in many instances, a concaved central fossa. Each has a slightly different dipping technique. Before we make our dip wax coping, we need to lubricate the die so that the coping will release after the margin is trimmed. I'm using slick lube for die lubrication. It's painted liberally on the surface and allowed to dry. Here's our anterior die with a single pointed incisal edge. Now I want to first show you making a coping in real time so that you can see the entire process and how quickly it happens. Ready? Here we go. There it is. Just that quick and easy. Now I'll show it to you again and point out the stages of the technique. First, hold the die in a vertical position in the center of the dipping well. Then dip very quickly into the dipping wax and make sure you dip beyond the bottom of the ditch. Withdraw it, leaving the wax slightly attached at the tip until it snaps back into the dipping well. All the excess wax has been drawn off of the tip of the die, leaving a smooth incisal edge. Here's our anterior die with the double pointed incisal edge. I'm going to make a coping in real time so you can see the complete process. And then I'll explain the individual details of making that coping. Ready? Here we go. And there it is. Just that quick, just that easy. Now let me explain how I made that very simple looking process happen. So first in this technique, I want to hold the die in a vertical position in the center of the dipping well. I'm going to plunge very quickly into the wax and make sure I dip well beyond the bottom of the ditch. I'm going to withdraw slowly and cant the die slightly so one of the incisal corners is the last place to exit. The wax was allowed to run down from the coping and snap back into the dipping pot so that I have no excess on either corner of the incisal edge. Here's my posterior die with cusp tips on the facial and lingual and a concaved central fossa. To prevent air from being trapped on the occlusal surface, I'm going to start at a 45-degree angle and roll the die into the liquid wax. And just that quickly, we've made our complete dip wax coping. Now let's make another one and identify the stages of the technique. First, I'm going to start with the die at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to roll the die into the wax so that the air is not trapped on the central fossa, leaving a bubble. Then I'm going to rotate the die so that when I roll out at the same direction I entered, a cusp tip is going to be the last place to exit. That's allowed the excess wax at the cusp tip to drain back into the dipping well. There, you see the little droplet on the very tip of the cusp? That's where the die exited the wax last. That's so much better than coming out vertically and filling the central fossa with wax.